My name is Ione Mercer, 70 years old this spring, and I've always prided myself on being steady, even in storms. I keep my hands busy, my voice calm, my back straight. That's what decades of raising a daughter alone taught me: control what you can, carry what you must, and never let them see you sink. It was early evening in Charleston, the air thick with May humidity that clung to the curtains in my front room. I had just settled with a glass of iced tea, my knees aching from a day in the garden, when my phone lit up on the side table. The sender was Meredith. I expected a last-minute question about flowers or seating charts. Instead, 6 words stared back at me, sharp as broken glass. "Don't bother coming to the wedding." I froze. The condensation on the glass slid down onto my hand, cold against skin, suddenly too warm. I read the words once, twice, a third time, waiting for more, a follow-up, a half-hearted joke, a typo corrected, but there was nothing. Just silence humming through the phone. My chest felt hollow, as though someone had pressed a fist into it. Meredith was my only child, the one I'd bent my whole life around after my husband died young. I pictured her as she'd been at 8 years old, hair sticking to her forehead as she ran barefoot through the humid Charleston summers. My voice calling her inside for supper. I'd worked double shifts then, sewing gowns at night for brides I barely knew, so my daughter could have new shoes for school. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night had pointed toward her future, and now, with one line on a glowing screen, she had drawn a border between us. I set the phone down carefully, though my hands shook. The house was too quiet, the ticking wall clock too loud. Outside, cicadas began their evening chorus. Indifferent to my unraveling, I pressed my palm flat on the table to steady myself, breathing in the smell of gardenia drifting from the porch. That night, I didn't call her back. I didn't call anyone. I sat in my quiet kitchen, the words etched into me like a scar just forming, knowing that by morning the shape of my world would not be the same after that message. Sleep would not come. I lay awake, the ceiling fan stirring the heavy Charleston air, and my mind wandered back to the years when it was just Meredith and me against the world. I was 28 when my husband, Thomas, died of a sudden heart attack. One minute he was mending the back porch rail. The next he was gone, leaving me with a 5-year-old child and a mortgage on a weathered house near the Ashley River. I remember the neighbors bringing casseroles and pitying smiles, but pity never paid bills. I went back to work within a week, first as a seamstress at a bridal shop on King Street, then taking any evening shift I could find. Those were years of threadbare shoes and coffee stretched too thin. I sewed gowns until my fingers blistered, altering lace sleeves for strangers while my own daughter slept in the next room. On weekends, I picked up shifts as a wedding coordinator at the old plantation venues scattered around Charleston White Point. Middleton, Magnolia, I guided brides down candlelit aisles and handed bouquets with a smile. Though half the time my stomach growled from skipped suppers, I knew every trick for quieting hunger: a glass of water before bed, a crust of bread saved from a catering tray. Meredith never saw that part. She saw new notebooks on the first day of school, ballet shoes when she begged for lessons, the occasional birthday cake with her name piped in neat pink frosting. I kept the ledger of sacrifices hidden because I believed that was a mother's duty to make struggle invisible so her child could feel safe. There were nights I'd come home long past midnight, collapsing into the kitchen chair with a pile of bills. I'd spread them out across the table, the ink smudged from damp fingers, and whisper to myself that I would find a way. Somehow, I always did. When tuition letters arrived from the private academy everyone said would set Meredith apart, I signed them, even if it meant pawning the pearl earrings Thomas's mother had given me. Looking back, I can still see the silhouette of my younger self framed in that kitchen window. Tired, but unyielding. A woman who thought love was measured by how much of herself she could give away. Charleston has always had a way of dressing things up, layering charm over cracks. Our family was no different. To the outside world, Meredith sparkled. Neighbors would stop me on Meeting Street, their voices warm with admiration. Your daughter's the brightest in her class. Ione. Such poise, such beauty. I would smile politely, though the truth pressed harder than the humidity they saw only her glow, never the work that lit it. At church gatherings, she was the one people drifted toward, drawn by her easy laugh and quick wit. My role was quieter, helping in the kitchen, pouring punch, keeping the little ones occupied so the adults could nod approvingly at Meredith's accomplishments. I heard my sister-in-law once whisper, "Ione is lucky her girl turned out so well," as if Meredith had raised herself from the ground up. Later, when social media arrived and took root, Meredith bloomed even brighter. She posted photographs in crisp white dresses against the backdrop of pastel Charleston homes, or sipping lattes at French Quarter cafes. Each image drew comments from friends and relatives. "So proud of you. You're destined for great things." I scrolled through those pictures alone at my kitchen table, noting how carefully she edited out the frayed couch where she had once done her homework, or the tired hands that had ironed those dresses late into the night. I learned to swallow my silence. At holidays, relatives gathered around Meredith with questions about her internships, her travels, her plans, my own stories, the nights at sewing machines. The weekends managing frantic brides were treated like background noise, part of the scenery rather than part of her rise. It was as if the world preferred to imagine she had sprung fully formed, golden and untouchable. Over time, I stopped correcting them. I let her shine while I carried the cords. The lights, the stage itself, still. A quiet ache lingered. I had given her everything, yet somehow, in the eyes of others, I remained invisible. When Meredith first announced her engagement, I felt a swell of something close to pride. She brought Alex home one balmy evening, his hand resting confidently on hers as they sat across from me in my narrow dining room. I studied the way she leaned toward him, her laughter brighter than I'd heard in years, and I thought perhaps this was my chance to be included in her joy, to be more than the quiet shadow behind her. I slipped back into the role I knew best: organizer, planner, caretaker. Charleston brims with wedding venues, each steeped in history and dripping with charm. I drove Meredith out to Middleton Place, the gardens fragrant with roses, the Ashley River glinting in the sun. She dismissed it quickly, wanting something less old-fashioned, but I didn't mind. I made notes, called contacts, even placed deposits from my own savings to hold dates at a few locations I thought she might like. Vendors knew me by name. After years in the industry, I could negotiate with florists, calm caterers, and line up photographers with barely a pause. I offered all of it freely to her, my experience, my time, my dwindling savings. For a while, I believed she saw it. She would text me quick thanks or lean over her phone to show me a dress style. And I let those small gestures stitch themselves into hope. But cracks showed early. One afternoon, as we walked through the grand ballroom at the Gadsden house, I suggested how the light might fall across the tables at sunset. Meredith barely looked up. "Don't stress me. Mom, it's my day." The words were soft, but they stung sharper than she knew. I brushed it off, telling myself all brides snap under pressure. I reminded myself that love means giving, even when thanks are scarce. Still, late at night, I caught myself tracing numbers in the margin of my checkbook. wondering if I'd gone too far again. Spending what I couldn't replace for a seat I wasn't sure existed. I kept moving forward, though, arranging flowers, finalizing menus, believing that when the music played and the vows were spoken, there would be a place for me too. The request came on a Tuesday evening, slipped into my phone like any other message. Meredith's words were brisk, almost businesslike. The florist says the final invoice is higher than expected. Can you cover the rest? I sat at my kitchen table, my checkbook already open, the smell of leftover collards rising from the stove. For a moment, I stared at the numbers I had written the night before. My savings account was already thinner than I dared admit. I tapped the phone with trembling fingers and typed back carefully. I already put down the deposit. That was my gift. I can't cover more. The reply came fast, sharper than I expected. Don't make this a big deal. It's just money. Just money. Easy for her to say. My chest tightened. I thought of the gowns I had stitched in the small hours of the night, of the pawn slips folded into my ledger, of the pearls I once sold to buy her textbooks. Nothing about money had ever been just for me. That weekend, I saw Alex's parents at a brunch held in a hotel downtown. His mother, prim in pearls and linen, placed a hand on mine as though she were soothing a child. "Ione, I hope you'll find a way to smooth things over," she said. "Meredith is under such strain. Let's not have anything tarnish her image before the big day." Her husband chimed in, voice lowered but firm. "A mother's role is to support. People will remember if you don't." Their words wrapped around me like a shroud, polite but heavy with judgment. I smiled weakly, though my insides burned. It wasn't just about flowers or invoices anymore. It was about being useful, without ever being seen. That night, as the cicadas sang outside my window, Meredith's final message arrived. No preamble, no apology, just a line that severed what little thread remained. "Don't bother coming to the wedding." The screen glowed in the dim kitchen, casting light across the unpaid bills and the photograph of a younger Meredith grinning with cake on her cheeks. My hand shook as I set the phone down. In that moment, something inside me folded closed. Not with anger, but with the quiet ache of someone finally told she was no longer needed. The night after Meredith's message, I cleared the kitchen table of everything but a stack of folders I hadn't touched in weeks. Contracts, invoices, emails, all of it bound together with neat paper clips. My handwriting marching across the margins in tidy notes. I had filed them under Mercer Events LLC, the business I once ran out of this very house. Though I'd long since retired, the registration remained active, its name still carrying the weight of my signature. As I spread the papers out, the truth sharpened. Every vendor, the venue at Gadsden House, the florist on King Street, the caterer in Mount Pleasant had signed with me, not Meredith. The deposits, every last dollar, had come from my account, and in bold type on each page, one clause repeated: final balances due 14 days before the event. Failure to pay will result in immediate cancellation. Deposits retained as credit. My eyes lingered on those lines. I had thought little of them before, treating the payments as gestures of love. Now they glowed like iron rails, outlining a power I hadn't known I still possessed. I wasn't ready to trust only my own reading. The next morning, I called Clara Duval, an old friend from church who had practiced law for decades. We met at a quiet cafe near Broad Street. She listened as I laid the papers across the table, her fingers steady as she turned each page. When she finally looked up, her expression was calm but firm. "Ione, these contracts answer to you, legally. You are the client of record. If the balances aren't paid, the vendors are obligated to release the dates. The credits revert to your business." I sat back, the clatter of cups and low murmur of conversation swirling around us. For the first time in months, I felt the weight shift. I wasn't powerless. Not entirely. In my hands lay the quiet leverage of paper and ink, the kind of strength no one had cared to see until now. That evening, the house seemed louder than usual, every creak in the floorboards echoing through me as I paced between the kitchen and the sitting room. The stack of contracts sat on the table where I'd left them, the edges straight and unyielding, but beside them now lay an old photo album I had pulled from the shelf. The leather cover was worn, corners frayed from years of thumbing through its pages. I flipped it open to a picture of Meredith on her first communion day, the little white dress I had sewn myself out of discounted satin. She had twirled in the churchyard, sunlight catching the beads I stitched by hand, and I remembered how proud she looked, how certain I was then that she knew she was cherished. I traced the outline of her smile with my fingertip, the memory colliding with the sharpness of her latest text. Don't bother coming to the wedding. The words cut differently when placed against the face of that child I once held close. My chest ached, but anger pulsed beneath it, a quiet fury at years of being useful, but unseen. Midnight came and went. The contracts lay spread open, invoices neatly aligned, my business name stamped on every page. The glow of my laptop lit the room, the cursor blinking on a blank email draft like a heartbeat daring me forward. I typed slowly at first, keeping each word stripped of emotion. As client of record for the event scheduled on June 14th, I will not be remitting the final payment. Please release the date and consider the deposit retained as credit for Mercer Events, LLC. I copied the note into 4 separate emails for the venue, the florist, the caterer, the rental company, reading them over and over, making certain they were professional, unassailable. No anger, no blame, just business. My hand hovered over the schedule function, a hesitation born of all the years I had bent instead of stood tall. Then I thought of the pearls sold for tuition, the nights sewing by lamplight, the empty chair reserved at the wedding that no one intended me to fill. At 12:47 a.m., I pressed confirm. The emails would leave my outbox at 9 sharp. I closed the laptop and set my palm over the photo album one last time. The child I remembered was gone, but the woman I was remained, steady at last in her choice. At 9 o'clock, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee cooling in my hand. The church bells downtown tolled faintly, marking the hour as my scheduled emails slipped quietly into the world. No thunder followed, no visible sign of the choice I had made. The morning went on as usual, traffic on Ashley Avenue, the murmur of neighbors tending their gardens, the salt breeze drifting in from the harbor. By noon, the first ripples must have reached Meredith. I pictured her in some salon chair, flipping through bridal magazines when the venue manager called with his crisp apology. The final balance had not been received. The contract was void, the date released. Perhaps she laughed at first, thinking it a clerical error. But laughter has a way of fading fast when the second call follows. The caterer would have been next, their office in Mount Pleasant running on schedule, polite but firm without payment. Their staff was reassigned, the menu canceled, the florist on King Street, always punctual, likely phoned not long after, explaining that the arrangements were no longer reserved. Each message would land like a stone, piling into panic. By early afternoon, my phone began to vibrate against the table. First one call, then another. The screen lighting with Meredith's name. I let it ring. Soon Alex's number appeared, then his mother's. Each time, I turned the phone face down, the buzzing a constant reminder of the storm breaking just beyond my walls. I imagined the scene: Meredith pacing, her voice sharp, her in-laws demanding explanations, the polished image of a flawless Charleston wedding dissolving into fragments. None of it required my hand. It was the contracts, the deadlines, the very rules they had ignored, doing their work. As the calls multiplied, I steadied my breathing, sipping the now lukewarm coffee. The chaos belonged to them, the quiet to me. The morning of the wedding dawned with a soft haze over Charleston Harbor, gulls wheeling in the pale sky. I wheeled my modest suitcase across the polished floor of Charleston International, the hum of departures echoing above me. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and coffee beans from the kiosk near Gate B7. I ordered a cup and found a seat by the window, the suitcase tucked against my leg. Travelers streamed past, families juggling strollers, businessmen glued to laptops, but I sat still, wrapping my hands around the warm paper cup for the first time in months. My shoulders felt light. Then the phone began to buzz. Meredith's name lit the screen first. I let it ring until the sound cut to silence. A moment later, Alex's number appeared, then his mother's. Then cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Each call stacked on the next, the counter climbing relentlessly. At 30 missed calls, I set the phone on silent. At 50, I placed its screen down beside the cup. By the time the number reached 110, the phone felt less like a lifeline and more like a caged animal rattling against the table. A voicemail broke through. The words faint through the speaker before I swiped it away. Meredith's voice cracked with panic. "Mom, the guests are here. There's no food, no music, nothing. Please, you have to fix this." The desperation in her tone carried years of expectation. The assumption that I would always step in, always absorb the weight, but I sipped my coffee instead. Steady and calm, listening to the distant announcements calling flights to Atlanta and New York. Outside, a plane lifted into the clouds, and I imagined myself already on it, carried away from the wreckage I no longer claimed. The chaos could howl at my door. I had chosen not to open it. The morning after the wedding, I drove down to Folly Beach while the sky was still dark. The streets were quiet, only the occasional porch light glowing against the damp air. I carried no phone, no suitcase, just myself and a jacket against the chill. The sand was cool beneath my bare feet, the tide low and whispering. I walked along the shoreline until the first threads of sunlight stretched across the Atlantic, turning the water from slate to silver. Gulls dipped low, their wings catching the light, and the world felt washed clean. I thought of my grandmother then, a stern woman with hands calloused from work, who used to tell me, "Love is a gift. Respect is the receipt. Without both, the purchase fails." At the time, I never fully understood. I thought love was enough, that giving endlessly would secure my place. Now, with the salt wind in my hair and the horizon opening before me, I finally grasped what she meant. Meredith's wedding had collapsed without me, but I hadn't destroyed it. I had simply stepped aside and stopped holding up a weight that was never mine to bear alone. The difference was subtle, yet it freed something inside me. The sun rose higher, painting the waves with gold. I stood still, breathing in the brine, letting the water lap over my ankles. The world seemed wider, my heart lighter. For once, there was no list to manage, no demands to answer, no voice insisting I was not enough. What remained was silence, soft and steady, like the tide itself, an inheritance I claimed at last.